In this lecture, we'll see about the different transaction state. A transaction must be in one of the following states. Okay, so this is the diagram. So basically, we have 5 different transaction state, starting from active, partially committed, failed, committed, aborted. Okay, so first one is active. The initial state. The transaction stays in this state while it is executing. If a transaction is executing, it means, let's suppose Ti is a transaction and there's some operations are there. These are the operations. Okay, so let's suppose this particular operation is being executed. This is already done and this is being getting executed. Then we say the transaction Ti is in active state. Okay, partially committed. After the final statement has been executed. So let's suppose this is the final statement of this transaction Ti. So if the final statement is being executed, then after this the transaction Ti enters into the partially committed state. Okay, so this is the final statement or the final operation, and that has been executed by the transaction. Then the transaction enters into the partially committed state. Failed. So after the discovery that normal execution can no longer proceed, then the transaction enters into the failed state. So a transaction can enter into the failed state from the active state or from the partially committed state. Okay, so the failed state occurs due to any kind of system failure. Okay, so this may occur if the transaction is in the mid of its execution, that is in the active state, then it may occur, or the transaction Ti is just completed its final execution and is about to committed or about to finished or about to committed, then this the transaction Ti may enter into the failed state. The fourth one is aborted. So after the transaction has been rolled back and the database has been restored to its state prior to the start of the transaction, and that is called as the aborted. So when the transaction enters into the failed state, then it is enter into the aborted state. So when it is aborted, when the transaction is rolled back, it means it enters into the all the data item that's already written, that is rolled back, so that is undone. Okay, so that is called as the aborted. So it is very simple. After the transaction has been rolled back and the database has been restored to its state prior to the start of the transaction. So let's suppose this transaction Tj starts and some operations occur. Okay, and after these operations has been already executed within the transaction Tj, let's suppose some system fails, so the transaction Tj enters into the fail state. So before going into the aborted state, all the operations that is done is undone, then only the transaction Tj enters into the aborted state. That is the meaning of rollback. Rollback means undone. Okay, now come to the committed. So it is after the successful completion of this transaction, so that is called as the committed. It means, let's suppose Ti is a transaction, so these are the operations within the transaction. So this is the first operation and this is the last. When the transaction executes the last operations, then it enters into the partially committed state. Okay, after the last operation, all the data is already written into the secondary storage, that is the hard disk. Then the transaction enters into the committed state. It means after the transaction enters the committed state, then if the system fails, then all the data that is already updated in the database, that persists. So there is no loss of data. That is the meaning of committed state. Okay, so we have some terms related to this transaction state, and that's called as a rollback, that we have already seen here in the fourth state. What is the meaning of rollback? So once the changes caused by an aborted transaction have been undone, we say that the transaction has been rolled back. So once the changes caused by an aborted transaction, so when a transaction enters into the failed state, then it enters into the aborted state. So aborted state means once the transaction have been undone, means whatever the transaction that is done by the whatever the operations that is done by the transaction that is undone, then that is called as rollback. So it is part of the responsibility of the recovery scheme to manage the transaction aborts. Okay, so rollback means, let's suppose in the transaction ti, a is equal to a minus 100 is done, and it is equal to write a. Okay, so let's suppose the initial balance of a is equal to 500. So when this write operation is done, then balance of a will be equal to 400. Okay, so rollback means the initial balance of a is equal to 500, that will be written back, not the 400. That is the meaning of rollback. So it means all the operations, the other two operations that is done, that will be undone, so that the initial value of a, that is 500, will be written back. That is the meaning of rollback. So now come to compensating transaction. So what is the meaning of compensating transaction? Once the transaction is committed, okay, once the transaction is committed, so it cannot be rolled back. Once the transaction is failed and it enters the aborted state, so in this aborted state, it all the operations that is done, that is undone, or all the transaction that is rolled back. So but in case of committed state, once the transaction enters the committed state, so the transaction cannot be rolled back. So the only one way that is we have, that is called as compensating transaction. So it is executed to undo the effects of committed transaction. Let's suppose the initial balance of a is equal to 1000 rupees, and let's suppose a debited of 100 rupees is done in account a. So a is equal to 1000 minus 100 is equal to 900, and the system or the transaction is committed. So let's suppose this transaction is done by mistake. Okay, so by mistake the rupees 100 is debited from account a. So since the transaction is already committed, we cannot do a rollback. So only way to get the original value of a, this account balance a, that is 1000, is by the compensating transaction. And a compensating transaction is nothing but by crediting 100 rupees into the account a, so that 900 plus 100 is equal to 1000, we get 1000. So that is the meaning of compensating transaction. Now come to terminated. A transaction is said to have terminated if it has either committed or aborted. So a transaction is said to be terminated if it has already committed or aborted. Okay, so this is the way we have the transaction move from one state to another. So this is the first state, that is called active, when the transaction is being executed. Partially committed, when the last operations within the transaction is executed. Committed, all the operations or all the updated made by the transaction is written into the disk, and it is called committed. And to compensate the committed, or to undo the committed operation, we have one option that is called as compensating transaction, because once a transaction is entered into the committed state, it cannot be rolled back. Okay, and a transaction can enter into the failed state if it is in the active state, or if it is in the mid of execution of its operation within the transaction, or from the partially committed state. Failed state, it may occur due to some hardware failure, some software failure, or any kind of system failure. From the failed state, the transaction enters into the aborted state. So in the aborted state, after the transaction has been rolled back and the database has been restored to its state prior to the start of the transaction.